On behalf of the Hoover Area Chamber of Commerce, my name is Paul Dangel. I'm the president of the chamber for the 2020 year, and want to welcome everybody to our second weekly town hall webinar. We are very pleased to be joined today by Tommy Brigham from ARC, JonathanBelcher, and Derek Waltchack, who are going to chat with us about real estate, both here in Hoover and nationally. And of course, certainly hear from our very distinguished mayor, Frank Brocato. So I do want to thank everybody for their time. We will have questions and answers at the end. If you would use the chat feature, if you're on an iPad, it's at the top right. You select chat and type your question. We can go through those. And if you're not on an iPad, on a computer, it is located at the bottom of the screen there. If you are on the phone portion, if you raise your hand or signify in another way, we will unmute your audio and allow that question. But again, we will do that after all these wonderful gentlemen have shared with us their experiences and how COVID-19 has changed their business models and what's going on in their individual industries. So the last thing I'll share is that I personally have a hard stop at 2 p.m. So if we are still going at that time, love for it to continue on. And Allison Steinecker, who's our vice president of the Hoover Chamber, will take over asking the questions at that time should that be needed. So without any further ado, I want to thank everyone again, and I will turn it over to our mayor, Frank Brocato.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Paul. And I would like to thank the chamber for hosting this as well. April Stone, thank you for your work in the chamber. We really appreciate it. And I do thank these three individuals for spending some time with us this afternoon. I think it's so important that our community and our businesses particularly hear information from what I consider to be experts in the industry, and it helps them make decisions going forward. And I'm certain that we'll have some questions as we move through this particular venue today. What I'm going to do, I'm going to read each bio of each of these gentlemen, and then I'm going to ask Derek to start, and then after they have all gone through their presentations, then we can ask questions. So I hope that will work for you. But let me just start off with Derek. Derek's a partner at Shannon Waltchack. He put his initial stamp on downtown Birmingham in 2010 with a commercial development near the city's railroad park. And that spearheaded about a $4.5 million renovation that transformed a 100-year-old warehouse into a cutting-edge business center known as Railroad Park. Shannon Waltchack also owns and manages commercial properties across the Southeast, including retail and office properties right here in Hoover, Alabama. You can't drive very far without seeing their signs. But due to our proximity to major interstates and strong demographics, Shannon Waltchack considers Hoover a hotspot in commercial real estate. Derek's also a subject matter expert on Bitcoin and blockchain, so I don't know if he'll share anything on that with us. That would be interesting. He serves on various boards throughout the area. He enjoys a chestnut tree farm, keeping bees, growing pumpkins, and he has a truffle orchard. Derek and his wife, Rushton, have 5 beautiful children, and they are members of Covenant Presbyterian. And then I'll move on to Tommy Brigham. Tommy is chairman and founding partner of ARC Realty, and it is recognized as one of Alabama's fastest growing companies and currently one of the market share leaders in the Birmingham Hoover Metro. Of course, Tommy's been in the real estate industry since 1974. When he graduated, just after he graduated from Emory and Henry College. The founder of Brigham Williams in 1982. Of course, that merged into Johnson, Raston, Hayes, and Realty South. And Berkshire Hathaway finally became part of that program as well. So very much ingrained in the real estate industry and certainly a well-known name throughout our city and throughout the metropolitan area. Tommy's is part of the UAB Athletic Campaign Committee. He currently serves as Vice President of the UAB Athletic Foundation and is a member of the Foundation's Executive Committee. He and his wife, have 3 children and 7 grandchildren, and they are members of the Mountain Brook Community Church. And then Jonathan Belcher, certainly one of our own, someone we're very proud that has been so integral in the growth of Hoover. Jonathan is president of the Signature Homes, co-founding the company with Dwight Sandlin in 1999. And prior to Signature Homes, Jonathan worked for Regency Homes and continued to work there following the sale of D.R. Horton Homes 3 years later. He has held a number of boards and positions, and he's involved with business organizations such as Vistage and Young Presidents Organization. He's also involved in he's a member of the Hoover Industrial Board. He and his wife Brandy, and they are Birmingham natives and live here in Hoover now with 2 sons, John Mark and Samuel. And certainly we are very grateful for all of the things that Jonathan does in and around our community. So with that said, I'm going to ask Derek, if you would, to start off and just kind of give us an idea of your industry and what you see.
Sure. Mayor, thank you for inviting me and Tommy and Jonathan. It's an honor to do this with you guys. I was thinking I was going to go third, so I was going to.
Well, we can do what you want.
But I will be happy to go first. Mayor, I want to thank you for the opportunity to see if my blazer still fits, and surprisingly it does. So I'm happy about that. My kids looked at me like, "What are you doing?" And I explained. We're going through obviously major turmoil at the moment. I don't think I've been looking for a long time for a corollary in history to where we are in the world as far as the economy goes, and you just can't find something in history where you stop demand and you stop supply like we're in right now, where things have just screeched to a halt. So we're kind of in this interim period, and then we'll have a period of coming back out. And I think what our next couple of years are going to be like will be based on the couple months that we open back up. So it's impossible to know at this time, but there's reason to be cautious and concerned. I think within commercial real estate, as a company, we own a bunch of small retail strip centers, basically shopping centers that are in neighborhoods and communities, a number of them in Hoover. And so what we have been building a portfolio towards was not malls, not power centers, not even grocery anchor centers, but small retail centers that are close to where people live, because we thought over time, as Amazon continues to eat more and more of soft goods and things that you might buy in a mall, the necessities and the things like where you get your hair cut and your nails and that type of thing, that's a future delivery device for retail that's gonna remain strong, we think. Although now that all services and restaurants are either closed or at a much decreased capacity, we've had a lot of pain in our portfolio, and so we have tried to help our tenants as best we can. First steps we took as a company was to, like I'm sure everyone out there that's listening, we turned our office into a virtual office connected with Microsoft Teams and Zoom and those types of technologies. And then after that, we quickly pivoted and went to lenders to get some breaks on deferrals from principal and interest. And in some circumstances, we were able to get some help. And then we tried to work with our tenants to pass on some deferrals of rent, knowing that, the average restaurant in the United States only carries 14 days of cash, which is a really low number, it's on the spectrum of retailers, restaurants carry the least amount of cash. And so, that is in our portfolio. I think we have 450 tenants. And, the majority of pain have been from restaurants, hair salons, nail salons, things that you can't do right now. So we're seeing that pain. I think Hoover is in a good place. Like you mentioned, Frank, with the interstates and the roads and the continuing to build homes. And I think you're in a good place. I do think that specifically malls are in major, major trouble. If you looked at the United States and pull all the malls together in April, malls collected on average 20% of their rent that they should have received. So that's not 80%. That's 20%. They did not receive 80%. And so I think what you're going to see are malls are going to the destruction of malls that are B or less is just going to happen much quicker. And I think that by this time next year, 60% of all malls will have gone back to the lenders. There was a major mall in a major city in Alabama that's about to be given back. I heard about this morning that this group's owned it for a long, long time, and they're about to hand it back to the lender. And so I think you're going to see that advance. I've also heard that Amazon had essentially a 5-year plan to roll out their grocery deliveries, basically that service. And I've heard that they've scrapped that 5-year plan and they're going to microwave that to an 18-month plan, just based on, the number of folks who've sat at home and have ordered groceries, and they think the time to capitalize on that is now. So I think the quick sentence on what's happening in the retail real estate world, which Hoover has a ton of that, is it's changing fast and very rapidly. And so I think it's going to be painful over the next couple of years in figuring out what wins, what loses, what types of sizes and spaces work, what kind of omni-channel, where if you're a retailer and you've got a web presence, but you also have a store presence, what's the right mix of that? How big do you need to be? Is the right mix for a retailer a very small shop with a large warehouse, where they can just quickly during the day get stuff? So I think retailers are figuring that out. I'm personally worried. I'm afraid that we'll look back at the stock market crash that we had in March, not as the bottom, but as sort of a warning and a trigger. In the middle of all this, you've got 5 things that we're having to deal with as a country, or will. You've got a pension funding crisis that's hard in the United States, that's getting worse. And with bonds going to 0 or less, that just is going to aggravate that problem. We've got the largest corporate credit bubble in the history of the world right now. And that's across the world. I think you're going to see an EU banking crisis. We currently have the largest wave of retirees retiring at the same time right now. And then you've got a huge oil crash that we're dealing with. So there's a lot of things and a lot of ways for things to get bad. And so I think it's really important, that we have good leadership. And that's something I think we should pray for.
I really appreciate it. Excellent information. I'm sure it's going to generate a few questions as well. Next up, I would like for Tommy, if you would give us a view of what the real estate market is looking like. Of course, here in Hoover, but you cover a lot more territory in the entire Birmingham Hoover metro area.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Paul and Chamber, for allowing us to be part of this town hall. I do think it's important we talk about real world, boots on the ground issues, and figure out how to collectively work together for the common good. And I think that's a message Derek was sending, and I'm sure Jonathan will as well. This is my 46th year in residential real estate, so I've seen a lot of things happen over the last 46 years. From the Arab oil embargo when I was first getting in the business, during the Nixon Carter years and the high interest rates, to all the way to 2001 to the huge recession. But I think this is the biggest economic and social experiment in the history of our country. I really do. It's both a economic experiment, and it's a social experiment. And how are we going to navigate with some of the uncertainties out there into whatever the new normal is? So all of us are trying to get our arms around that. We certainly are at ARC Realty. And I guess some of the things that we are trying to do is to stay engaged in a virtual sense with virtually everybody in our company. We have a leadership meeting. We were having it every morning at 9 o'clock. We've gone to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday because after a while the topics begin to run together. Then I'm part of a national group that's part of Real Trends out of Denver, and we have a best practices group of 14 companies that meet twice a year at different locations to evaluate everything from our financial statements to our best practices. So we get to listen and learn on Tuesdays each week to what's going on across the landscape of the country. I'll say this, the good news is that in Birmingham, Alabama, and Alabama as a whole, we're holding our own in residential real estate in a way that's fairly impressive. And I'll say the same for what I'm seeing from my counterparts in North Carolina and parts of Ohio, where the struggle lies is in Denver. Our counterpart, Denver's business is off 92.5%. That's a lot. In San Francisco, it's off 80%. Ours is off 30% right now. We had a great first quarter, best in the history of our country. Our company, and I suspect our competitors in the marketplace had a good first quarter as well. Our April, we're going to survive and come out, flat. But what the concern is May, June, July going forward, because listing inventory in Metro Birmingham has fallen 45% in the last 30 days. So if you think about 45% listing inventory dropping and people sitting at home wondering, when am I going to be able to get out and look at a house? It becomes sort of a challenging experiment is what I call it. What has happened in a very positive way is I think the internet in 1995 began to change the landscape of real estate and all of our economy. And part of the reason that Brigham, Williams, and Johnson, Rass and Hayes formed Realty South back in 1998 was that Bob Reed and I got together and really talked candidly about the future and how print media was probably going to disappear and the internet was going to take over the landscape of our industry. And obviously trying to convince the agent population that we were going to have to move away from print was not easy because everybody was comfortable in the way it used to be. I feel it's sort of the same way this is taking place right now, where virtual technology, the use of communication through various devices, literally open houses virtually to showing houses virtually. We have our own title company, and our closing attorney closed a loan yesterday, and the buyer was in Montgomery, and the house was in Birmingham, and it closed virtually. And so those kind of things are taking place, and transitioning into that type of world is going to be part of our future. And we really all have to embrace it. I'll be 70 in a year, so you're asking an older guy to embrace some technologies that are a little out of my comfort zone compared to some of the younger generation. But it's part of what we're going to see across the landscape of our country. I think Hoover's in a great place. I agree with Derek. It's just a great city. It's got terrific leadership. And I think the reality is that what's the ability to buy a great new house like Signature Bills or an existing home is still at the center point of where I think the consumer will end up landing. And the over the mountain areas, generally speaking, are going to come out stronger and better than others. We are seeing buyers out there. They're interested in buying right now. The inventory is very low. And I guess what I'm hearing mostly from the national landscape, which trickles down to us, is that the analysts that we're talking to, both with the National Association of Realtors and with some analysts from Wall Street that we work with on a more of a broader, bigger picture, is that there's a strong feeling that because of a combination of the political landscape in an election year, the probability that Trump's going to want to stimulate the economy even more and put more money in the economy, which one day our children and grandchildren will have to pay for, but it's reality. And all those things with the low interest rates, the low inventory, and a pent-up buyer pool that's growing by the day, and we're seeing that in our own company, and I suspect others are, is that housing, residential housing, unlike the struggles that maybe the retail industry is going to have, will be one of the leaders in the economic segment of our country that leads us out of this recession and into a more robust economy. And I really believe that's true because we see it, the pent-up demand, the interest in housing, as well as the stimulus that I believe. Now, the question is, when is that going to happen? I'm on a conference call, and Frank, you may be on it too, on Saturday mornings with the leadership at UAB and the medical school. They've got about 40 different people from the business community, along with Herb Chin, the chief of surgery, facilitating. And we're listening and learning about sort of the whole idea of what's happening from a medical technology standpoint. And, I probably should have bought stock in Remdesivir about a month ago when they started bringing it up in that meeting. And I said, that sounds promising. And all of a sudden it went up $7 a share with Gilead. But the truth is that between UAB, which is a fabulous institution, and the CDC and other institutions around the country, they're working with great diligence for a vaccination. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think that the entrepreneurial spirit right now, which is part of the DNA of our country, is going to pull us out of this thing. It's going to take a while to get out, but I do think residential housing will be one of the leaders in bringing us out of this. And I frankly don't exactly know how to respond to the retail space, because I think Derek's right. I do know that from our standpoint, we believe that having probably smaller offices that are more open and technologically driven, and being able to help our agent population and then the consumer as well to develop how to use those technologies in a more robust way, and then move forward in a way that we get beyond this, what I call social and economic experiment, into the new normal. And I think that's where we are.
Thank you. That's very encouraging to hear a lot of what you said there. Jonathan, your supply side, I guess, be interesting to hear your perspective on your side of the fence, so to speak.
All right. Well, let me start off by saying one, thanks again. I'll just echo what both Tommy and Derek said. We appreciate the opportunity to participate in this. I also know that you've had a lot of tough decisions these last 6 weeks, and keeping the construction industry as an essential part has been really important. With the construction that takes place just in the city of Hoover, there's over 1,000 different workers across job sites just in our city limits each day. So we appreciate that, and it's had a really big positive effect. A lot of you know we're headquartered in Ross Bridge, and most of our business is in Hoover, but we're also in the Nashville, Tennessee market. And this year in Hoover, we expect to build about 300 homes in just the city alone. And I'll say that I'll echo some of Tommy's comments in that we entered this environment we're in probably the best shape we have been in the new construction market. We're in a builder benchmark group with other builders around the country, and collectively all the group had a record first quarter in terms of the number of sales, which really built up a lot of what we refer to as just backlog of homes to be built. So entering into this, we had a lot of built up demand and a lot of customers who are excited we're able to carry forward, which is really just going to demonstrate a lot of positive numbers for the next couple of quarters. But I'll speak to that, and I think some of the challenges as we get a little bit further in the future. Really starting the week of March 16th, we saw meaningful change. We saw buyers' behaviors with the adaptation to comments by our governor, the social distancing that had to take place. We saw less what we refer to as traffic coming into our model homes. And then our multiple listing service, the Birmingham Board of Realtors, took a very wise position and said we'll no longer have open model homes. So it certainly changed the way we've done business, and we're really preparing for the worst going into April, and have been monitoring our sales and cancellations on a weekly basis. That third week of March, we had several customers elect not to go forward and cancel their contracts because of concerns and just the unknowns of what was going on in the market. But I'm happy to say here we are 4 weeks later, and the cancellations that we've had have been typical with this type of spring market. We also are expecting April to meet what our original pro forma was set out to be at the beginning of the year, which really speaks to the strength of the real estate industry in our city of Hoover, And I also think it tells us that the home buyers are really looking well beyond the environment we're in today. About 80% of our business is pre-sold. We don't build a lot of speculative homes. We actually had the lowest amount of speculative inventory coming into mid-March. So as a company, we're also prepared for this, but that also carries a lot of business going forward into this year. Just to give you a few statistics on new construction, in the last 12 months, going from April 1 to March 31, there were 362 homes, new homes, that were closed in the city of Hoover, so about 30 a month. And there's only 86 homes for sale right now in the market, which is a little less than 3 months worth of inventory. And in our industry, we look at 6 months as a healthy amount of inventory. So you can see we're very undersupplied. Again, the same thing as Tommy's seeing in the existing home market. And that gives you both positives and negatives. There are a lot of buyers out there that just their need can't be met, because in our industry, anywhere from about 40 to 50% of buyers they do so because of necessity, and the other 50 to 60 is typically a discretionary purchase. So, and to give you some more perspective, a year ago, this time there was about a 5-month supply of new homes on the market. So again, we entered this into really great shape. In the last 4 weeks, we've really not seen a decline in the overall sales, even though we've seen a lot less traffic coming into our model homes. And those are all good looking at past. The things that we look at going forward is our pending sales. And in the city right now, just city of Hoover alone, there's 208 sold new homes that have not yet closed. And so if you look at that and look at the inventory available to purchase, there was 93 homes that closed in the first quarter alone, just new again. We're on pace to be in that same 350, 360, maybe even 370 homes closed this year, which is on pace with what we did last year. Now, I don't expect to see that nationwide, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But one thing that's been a pleasant surprise is really the high-end part of our market, which we know the stock market has a bigger influence on, but there's just a few high-end neighborhoods in the city, meaning a $700,000 plus neighborhood. That would be the Glascott area of Ross Bridge, the Preserve, and then the Black Ridge community that we're developing and building. And what we saw was right at 50 homes that were sold and closed in the last 12 months. And we expect that number to be again greater than 50 this year, just with the current backlog of sold homes that exist today. Permitting numbers in the city is on pace for about 450 permits this year. The reason that number is a little higher than the number of homes sold is that not all homes that are constructed are recorded on the Birmingham listing service. So you're always going to have a few more construction permits that show up. But again, that'll be the largest number we've seen in the city since 2007 with that level of permits. So jumping more to a macro view, I think there's some real positives we're seeing. There's some negatives we're seeing. You know, the positive is that we're seeing prices of homes hold steady. We're seeing less cost inflation. We're seeing some relief in that. Some of that's from the labor market, because there are a lot of folks that are out of work in some areas, but that also moves over into the construction industry and helps us pick up additional labor there. Builders are able to continue to build in most states. There were, I think, either 3 or 4 states that did choose to make new construction as a non-essential industry. As we said earlier, the inventory is very, very minimal right now, which has pros and cons to it. But what it does do is help support the overall home values that are there. Mortgage rates continuing to be at record lows are also a real support for the housing industry. But on the negative side of that, we're seeing some tightening of the credit market, which will eliminate some of the buyers, which also reduces some of the demand that's out there. On a national basis, we did see sales decline pretty significantly in the month of March, mainly the back half. The last 2 weeks were about 8% lower than the previous year. But the overall first quarter, there were 25% more sales than there were nationally last year. Again, that's past tense. With the things that have taken place, the number of folks we're seeing out of work, there is a large backlog to work through, but what we expect to see on a national level is a reduction in those starts as we get to the third and fourth quarter. And you're going to see, we're at least planning to hear a lot of negative headlines in that new construction being down because those headlines are going to compare against the previous year. So we're planning for those. We expect that number to be somewhere in the 10 to 20% range, depending on the quarter. But as I mentioned earlier, we don't expect to see that in the city of Hoover. We're just in such a local industry. It's influenced by more things locally than nationally, taken aside from the rates and just the general consumer confidence that's out there. But Hoover will have different numbers, we think, than what we'll see nationally, just because of there's so many different markets that are there. So don't be surprised when you do see reduction in starts and new home sales. That is inventory driven. That's builders just making conscious decisions to reduce their speculative inventory that they keep, and then just comparing to hard numbers as they continue to go forward because we had such a strong fourth quarter and first quarter coming into this time. Thank you.
Well, gosh, just some really incredible information. I was trying to jot down some notes as we go. But what's interesting, something that the city of Hoover has faced for many, many years, not just the city, but all cities, and that's internet sales. And we see, Tommy, I think you mentioned how it started in '95, if I'm not mistaken, where you saw your industry going that way. And of course, I think that it obviously started somewhere around that time for retail as well. But this is going to accelerate it. It's something that we were already fighting in Montgomery to get the internet sales tax distributed in a fair way, particularly the cities like Hoover that have a tremendous retail presence. So what you gentlemen have said today just reinforces how important that is, because obviously the internet is going to come into play even more so. And I don't know who mentioned this particular statistic, but Amazon has moved from a 5-year plan to go to grocery sales to an 18-month plan. Derek, was that you that mentioned that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we are loaded with stores in the city of Hoover. I can tell you that. With our questions generating out there, I don't want to take up all. I've got several to myself to ask. Are there any questions generating out of we got a great participation today, 97 people. That's pretty phenomenal. Paul?
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. We do have one question out there. It was from Alicia White, and she wanted to know, for existing sales, does anyone see a problem with the appraiser or home inspector having access to the property?
I can take that. First of all, I think that they've loosened the regulatory requirements on the appraisals. So in fact, there are some lenders that are now allowing for appraisal after the fact, and there are more and more allowing for appraisal drive-bys, where they do a drive-by. They don't actually go in the house. They do a competitive market analysis or appraisal of the general location, and the appraisal will stand for Fannie and Freddie guidelines. So I think that in itself is a positive for the environment we're in, and will continue for the foreseeable future. As far as inspections go, I think the inspections are really pretty much on par. You just have to schedule them a little bit differently, and there has to be a little different level of preparation. But overall, we're not seeing any real issues with inspections thus far. And one other comment I'd make about that I wanted to make was about the employment issue. We will really not see the opportunity for the residential real estate industry to come back to full robustness until we see some stability in the unemployment. And that's what gets back to this whole idea of stimulus. And what I think is going on to try and create a path forward for more employment in the United States and to bring the supply chains and so forth back to the United States so that we have a stronger economic future by employing the citizens of the United States currently and getting them back into the market. And I think that will be a big part of what you're going to see in this political process.
Great. Mayor, this one might be up your alley, but anybody certainly can jump in. It's from Jana, and she'd like to know, what is the short-term and long-term plan for retail space in Patton Creek? I see more and more businesses moving to Trace Crossings. It would be great to see Patton Creek be revived.
Well, I'll tell you from the city standpoint, we had our eye on Patton Creek a long time ago, and we have had some really good conversations with the owners of that development. It was a little bit of a struggle early on to really get in touch with the folks that had some decision-making process going on over there. So it certainly is one of our targeted areas of Hoover. We look at it in conjunction with the entire Galleria campus and how that will all fit. So it's on the radar. And, you know, let's face it, this has changed the way we're going to be looking at real estate, just the entire landscape altogether. So we are looking at it. We want to address that one, but not just particular area. We're looking at the mall and other shopping centers as well throughout the city. So it is definitely.
Mayor, this is Alan. Could I amplify that comment very quickly?
Yes.
Hey, yes, sir. Yeah, so Paul, a lot of what people have seen in terms of vacancies at Patton Creek were, to our understanding, leases that the property owner or management company elected not to renew. That may or may not be the case in every single situation, but people have seen higher vacancy rates and gotten very concerned. But in some cases, that plays into the overall redevelopment plan that the property owner has. We're not fully privy to that, but we're aware, and our economic development manager has been very engaged with them in conversations, that they really want to take that entire parcel in a different direction. And I think that, of course, we'll have to wait and see the impact of current events. But prior to this phase that we're in right now, I think their thought process was you would see a substantial redevelopment of that entire property. So obviously they needed vacancy to be able to make some of those structural changes. So it looks distressing when you drive through and you see more stores gone than there were 3 months ago, but there are some plans there on the part of the property owner that are not widely understood, I think, by the general public. And we actually, at the right moment in history, could come back with something nicer and better than what was there before.
Great. Thank you, Alan.
I would just add that center has been, I think, honestly, poorly designed from the very beginning, and it's struggled. And I think unless you do some major physical changes to that property, it's always going to be a struggle. And the shame of it right now in the retail world was that there was a consensus among large mall owners and just kind of the direction that retail is going is more experiential. And so you're going to see more bowling alleys, axe throwing, just more stuff that people can go do and be entertained by. But what is COVID-19 telling us not to do right now? Is to not get together and not to do all those things. And no, I don't think this will last forever, but I do think that was sort of the solution in the back of everybody's mind. And that solution, at least at this time, doesn't work. So I think that throws a little ripple into some retail landlords' redevelopment plans.
Excellent point. Alicia had a second question for probably, again, perhaps for Mayor, but anybody chime in. With the sales tax losses that the city is going to experience, will we see an increase in property tax in the future?
The easy questions.
Well, property tax will be voted on by the citizens. And that's not property tax increases are not very popular. I don't know of any tax increases that are very popular, but we feel like we're in a position to manage the revenue that we have coming in, even through this COVID event, we feel like we're in a good position to manage our city and to operate within the revenue that we're already provided. So I've said before, and I don't think that it would happen in the first place, but if there were a proposal or a vote to increase our sales tax, that's something that I would veto.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. At this time, at least on the chat, there are no more questions. I do know that we can certainly go through if anybody has a question they'd like to ask on their own. On the phone, you can push *6 to unmute, or if you are on the computer and visibly in front of us and would like to ask something, you can unmute and ask. We'll give a few seconds for that, and if not, we'll I know the mayor may have some further remarks.
So, Derek, your industry, your line of business, you have a lot of mom and pops in there, the restaurants, the nail salon. How do you see that industry? Everybody wants to get back to work. And the big issue out there is how do we get Alabama back to work? How do we get America back to work? And I've said that the government can't come up with the way to make all of these businesses safe, that the businesses themselves are going to have to generate that standard operating procedure and then sell that to the health officials to more or less bless it. Do you see that happening do you see your tenants, your nail salons, your barber shops, your restaurants having input from their national organizations or just from plain experience of operating their business, sharing with you how they can open their business safely?
I think this week is kind of marking a turn, at least in psychology, among tenants, where, okay, we now need to think about our reentry plan. What's that look like? I know personally for our company, we started on Friday, trying to find some plans online, what other people are doing to kind of figure out how do we safely bring back our employees, and I think the way we're thinking about it right now is maybe you do a third, and a third. And so we kind of figure out, okay, who should come in first? Or you could even, you could rotate and have, groups of people in there on different days that they, have the benefit of interacting in person. But as far as the tenants go, I think the ones that have the franchise organization, that proves how beneficial that is.
Sure.
Really hard to make this up. And, a lot of tenants, they're, they speak a different language. A lot of nail salons and some hair salons and restaurateurs. I mean, they're citizens, but they may be first generation citizens. And so a lot of people like that, they really need some help and some handholding. And they were quite frankly afraid to interact with the government, just the uncertainty of how all this works. And so I think there were some issues with that implementation. It's going to be hard. I was speaking with a restaurateur here in town, and they're not a tenant of ours, but the restaurateur is explaining right now that with their employees, they're actually making more money being unemployed than they would be employed by a restaurant. Basically with unemployment plus, and I don't understand the details of this, but it's basically two sources of income, and they're at like $875 a week, $875 a week. And they're like, that's more than I could ever pay these people. And so I think the restaurant industry in particular is going to have a difficult time getting back up to staff unless there's some, the reduction in those benefits happens, because, they're better off not working. And that's an incentive. Like, while that was important, I think, to fill a hole, it's not something that you want to keep going forward, because that's not a healthy thing for the government to do, in my opinion. So I think that's a challenge. And the other thing I would add is, let's pretend again like you're a restaurant and the government, whatever entity says, we need you guys to be at 50% capacity with your tables. Okay, well, so your restaurant, you remove 50% of your seats to achieve sufficient social distancing. and you're able to sell to go as well, I mean, you might be at 65, 70% of your total volume. And at 65 or 70%, most restaurants are still losing money at that point. So I think that's going to be a huge issue. And they're seeing that in China right now as things are opening back up in Wuhan, in Guangzhou, and some other cities. You're seeing that very dynamic happen with the restaurants.
Well, that's interesting. And again, information is very important. And the fact that tells you the opportunity here in the city to reach out to those businesses. We do realize that oftentimes with some of our international tenants, first generation, as you said, they don't have the ability to communicate very well with government, and oftentimes they are afraid of government. So that, to me, is an opportunity for us, our business team, to step out and to call on those individuals. And something that we've done early on is to put a business helpline in.
Okay.
And that allows our businesses throughout the city, and we've gotten calls from really all over the metro. And that way we can connect these business owners that may not have that franchise resource that you talked about. Someone that with the expertise, we're trying to match those folks up with the expertise out there.
That's
so
good.
I know we've got a few minutes. We've got about 12 minutes left. It may not take all the time, but I'd love to hear. I've got a lot of questions, but I don't think we can get to all of them. I'd love to hear what we could do as a city for each of your industries, if that's possible. And if you take 2 or 3 minutes to share that, and I'm going to be jotting down notes as you go. Jonathan, why don't you start if you don't mind?
Okay. Mine would probably be the most brief. I appreciate the opportunity to answer that. Keeping the Planning and Zoning Commission rolling, because for us, new phases of development, again, as I spoke to, we still are seeing great demand in our communities, and we're still developing new home sites. And so those planning and zoning hearings we're dependent upon for having new engineering approved and having new final plats approved. The building inspections department has done a great job. That's been fairly easy to navigate. We really haven't even seen delays in permitting, even though we know the office staff has alternated and there's been some additional durations for the permitting side. So from our perspective, we're happy.
Great, good information. Thank you so much. Tommy?
Mayor, could I speak to that very quickly? Jonathan, even while we've been on this call, Wendy Dickerson, the clerk, and I have been texting back and forth about planning and zoning and trying to make sure that we get meetings back opened up, and we'll be dealing with the chairman and getting his thoughts, and I'm sure he'll be very sympathetic to that as well. So we're trying to figure out the right mechanism to continue exactly what you just talked about.
Yeah, and I think ours is more the baseline where it can be done more digitally, where even the members of the commission could still review without having to be in person.
Well, thank you
Exactly.
for reinforcing that. That's a hot topic around City Hall.
Thank you.
Reinforcing the importance of that. Tommy?
Well, one thing I would say is, what can we do to serve the good citizens of Hoover ourselves? How can we be a positive partner in the process? And I think one of the things our manager in our Hoover office, Thad Lowry's done a good job of is promote local engagement with the local businesses, and we're going to continue to do that in a more assertive way and try and promote the local businesses that we have relationships with to help them get past this as well. As far as us, I mean, it's pretty simple, buying and selling houses. If we are able to list houses and sell houses and then transfer that opportunity into participating in the process of making Hoover stronger and better, that's our goal. We really feel we're partners in this. We're in it together. And so to the extent we can be partners in anything we're doing with the city of Hoover and really with the broader metro area, that's our goal and objective. And one thing I'd say is that, you know, we're given one day. And so how do we make each day the best day it can be what kind of things can we do each day to help each other be successful, and then get to tomorrow and make that same commitment the next day. And that way we're going to get past this together.
Hey, I appreciate that's exactly right. And in terms of, we are partners, and I often rely on the real estate industry. I think you're kind of boots on the ground, so to speak. You're out there in the community. You know what people are saying about not only Hoover, but as it moves down actually into each and every neighborhood, and what's the good and what's the bad about it. So that's so important that we continue to hear positive and the negative feedback. It's just very, very important, and your industry certainly is on the forefront of that. But thank you so much for your comments. And Derek, I'll let you kind of close us out there if you don't mind.
Okay. That was good. Tommy and Jonathan, those were good. Particularly the fact that you have one day at a time. It's really easy to get overwhelmed by the potential future, which we don't know anyway. We think we do. You asked a good question. I was thinking hard, Mayor, through that. I came up with three things. One would be, as these tenants reopen, I think the city, the chamber, all have the ability to shine a big spotlight on good things in Hoover, and y'all do a good job of that. I think giving as much attention to retailers when they're reopening, to let the public know, hey, it's back open and here's this. I just think almost like if you could have a commercial each day for each retailer. I don't know how the numbers would work out, but where you could increase sales at least for a period of time just by bringing them up. Second, I should know this, but is Hoover participating in Birmingham's plan where they put some money aside to help businesses? All right, do y'all have your own similar?
No, we don't have a fund set particularly for that.
Okay.
What we did was the helpline where we are putting the businesses in touch with those resources.
Got it.
Banks, the federal government, the Small Business Association, things like that.
Okay. Well, I think that that's good. And my third point was going to be, or is to a lot of this is emotional. And I know for our retailers, they're embarrassed to ask for help. They're embarrassed for, it's not their fault. I mean, this is, it's not. But they're embarrassed and they don't know how to fix the problem. And so I think staying positive, which you guys clearly are being, the helpline where you help people feel like they're not alone. It gives them a little bit more emotional energy to kind of fight, which is what it takes right now, because you're not open. And, I think those are important, letting people know that they're not alone. Maybe you could consider a fund of some sort for some businesses. I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of the city, but you could look at something like that as well.
Well, certainly some of the things that we are doing, we are actually actively calling on our businesses, picking up the phone. I'm calling our business development folks there. We're all involved calling our businesses to see what we can do to help them. We're gathering a lot of information. We actually have multilingual individuals that can reach out to someone that's, you mentioned the nail salons, primarily run by the Vietnamese.
Totally.
So we have those types of resources available, and we just want to make sure, of course, in your network of when you're talking to people, be sure and let them know about that if you would.
Yeah, I don't know another city doing that. I'm sure there are, but that's good. Kudos.
So we started that really quickly in the process, probably one of the first things that we did. So with that, gentlemen, I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you have shared with us today in the 90 some odd participants. We've learned a lot on the city side in terms of what we can do. And I'm just grateful that you would give up an hour to share that with us. And I know that each of you enjoyed that. I know the type of individual that each one of you are, and you love your communities and you love to give back. So with that said, unless somebody just has something really burning to say, we are going to give our helpline out. Once again, it's 205-739-7162. And of course, you can go to the City of Hoover's website and gather a great deal of information on COVID. And you can also have an opportunity to look at the different helplines that we have available. So with that said, again, to the Chamber, thank you. Paul, thank you. And to you three gentlemen, we're grateful. Have a great
Way to do it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now for the awkward hang up.